Right, I'm going to try and get through a 30-minute presentation in about 10 minutes, so it's going to go fairly fast. But these slides will be available afterwards if you want to go and look, and you can always go and look at my blog and things. So first of all, who am I? Well, first and foremost, I'm a technologist. I started programming on one of those, some of you might recognise, a BBC Master, at the age of 9. Moving forwards a bit, in 2002, I founded Memset with my brother Nick to exploit this strange new gap between shared web, bit of an echo there, between shared web hosting and dedicated servers called virtual dedicated servers, using initially something called user mode Linux, since we've moved on to open source Zen. We're the UK's first carbon neutral ISP, and we just keep winning awards. And also we're the cheapest in the market. Now, I'm not just saying that to show off, although maybe a little bit, but relevant to this conference, we're entirely based on open source software. And also we use a lot of web-based technologies, collaborative wikis, that sort of thing, open, things like technologies like SVN. And we're quite a small company, but punch well above our weight. So we really do prove that open source can be a very effective business tool. I'm also an officer of the Data Centre Specialist Group with the British Computer Society. It's one of my many roles. I'm also the chair of Intellect's Climate Change Group, and I have a big focus on green IT, which is one of the reasons why I got involved with the Cabinet Office. I'm also doing some work with Surrey University at the moment on optimal virtualization infrastructures. And all that culminates really in where I've ended up, which is helping the UK's Cabinet Office with their G-Cloud programme. And Cabinet Office, basically, that's the heart of government. And hang on, there we go. And the first question is, so why has the UK government woken up to cloud computing? What are they trying to achieve? Basically, computing in Britain, public sector computing in Britain, has become untidy, bloated, and expensive. We spend $25 billion a year on IT, which is more than per capita than just about any other country. It's over $400 per head of population. Also, there's something like 140 data centres, and it's just, nobody really shares anything. It's just a bit of a mess. And all the things that you can see on that list there that the UK government really want, well, you'll notice a lot of them sound rather cloudy. There's been some talk about what cloud actually is. This is how I try and sum up cloud. It's the NIST model. I've stuck it on a cube. And actually, the UK government want all of those features. They want to be able to do infrastructure, sort of basic hosting. They want platforms that they can build on for rapid deployment. They want to be able to do shared software services. Also, there's different requirements. For some things, if it's a website, it could be on a public cloud. Some high security requirements might need to be on something more private. But equally, for many of the things they need, they're a big user of IT, so they want a nice big community cloud they can share together. So one very large hybrid, not one, potentially several hybrid clouds is what we're looking at. The only feature that perhaps wouldn't be fitting with a traditional definition of cloud computing would be the broad network access, slightly more restricted network access for government services. Now, one thing that we did all agree on within the G-Cloud, which is nice, is what we meant by infrastructure versus platform versus service, versus software, sorry, which I'm just going to mention briefly, because a lot of people say about it's just hardware and middleware and software, isn't it? And I say, well, it is to an extent, with one important difference, which is now there's the virtualization layer. And what we all agreed upon is that virtualization should be considered part of the infrastructure layer these days. And that's really what we looked at as for infrastructure service, that the virtual machine being that core unit of compute resource. Taking that stack, now I'm not going to go through this diagram in too much detail, but just to give you an idea, this is the proposed high-level logical architecture for the G-Cloud, which I basically drew this diagram with some help from the rest of the team. You can see flows, for example, top left, a prototype component repository where things get certified, become available through an app store, then in the ideal, ultimate world, probably a good 10 years away, can be automatically deployed by the user onto some level of the stack. And the stack, in the sort of lower left area, the big chunk, that could be provided from a number of different service providers, which is, again, one of the really core things that the UK government wants to do. At the moment, there's only 6 big providers, really. Oh. Hair on the microphone. Should look at that. There's only really 6 providers in providing government ICT in Britain at the moment. The large systems integrators who know many of them. And they want to widen that market up a bit, which is good news for smaller enterprises like mine. Also, there's things like what you do with the human element, the service integration. So trying to factor that in. That's the purple bit in the middle. Trying to make available all the data. Government have a huge amount of data. So trying to expose that, you can see over on the left, through standardised data aggregation and distribution services. So really quite a very grand vision, but it's a long way from getting there. And we sort of see a maturity model over time. At the moment on the left, you can see very fragmented, lots of different data centres. The first step is to try and rationalise that legacy IT. And then moving forwards into initially just a number of discrete, probably private clouds, probably in existing provider data centres, moving on to community clouds, so maybe a number of providers coming together or a number of users coming together to use one cloud and pool their resources, and moving all the way up until the ultimate vision of a fully integrated dynamic cloud where workloads can be dynamically shifted around in response to requirements, potential security threats even. But that's, that process probably will take, I would say, a decade. Now, what about security in the last few minutes? A lot of people seem to think that security and cloud are not happy bedfellows. I'd actually disagree entirely. We've run several thousand virtual machines. We've never had anybody break out of them, but despite lots of attempts. And actually, I think in some ways it could be more secure. So security through obscurity is one of my favourite concepts. If somebody broke into my data centre, they'd be faced with banks of thousands of machines, each hosting, potentially tens of virtual machines. They wouldn't possibly know which one to steal. Obviously, coming in over the wire, it's a different question. But the view of GCHQ, which is the British spooks, is basically that although they trust some sorts of virtualization, the hypervisor isn't sufficiently trusted yet, so they still want to see physical segregation. So what that means is that at certain security levels, and we talk about impact levels, where impact level 0 might be a website, impact level 6 might be the firing codes for nuclear missiles or something. Try and keep my voice down. You need to actually physically segregate the infrastructure that's holding those bits of data, and some might need to be in sort of very high security data centers. However, at the lower level, there are going to be some public cloud services which are suitable for hosting some some government services. For example, websites. Some recent examples of health scares where the government website fell over. It could have been hosted on Amazon. They could have scaled it up very rapidly. And since they've learned from that and looking at deploying that sort of solution. Again, this is another slightly complex diagram that I'll try and run through. But for the other impact levels, so other sort of higher security services, it's still possible to take a cloud approach. The purple blobs, that's something I postulated those sort of impact level 2 services. Those are things that are confidential data, stuff you don't really want to lose, but it's not going to cause somebody to die if you do. You could potentially have that hosted alongside in the same physical building as a public cloud provider, a company like mine, as long as it was segregated off, so maybe in a caged-off area, dedicated bit of infrastructure, with dedicated links into the government secure network, the Government Secure Connect Extranet, GCSX it's called. It's going to become the public sector network. Some services, the sort of cyan blob in the top left, maybe you could host with someone like Amazon, a pure cloud infrastructure. And then for the higher security stuff, if you're in the bottom right, maybe a sort of buried bunker with sort of armed guards outside, might be suitable for hosting some of the more secure and sort of the potentially more damaging information, say public health records. But you can still take a cloud approach to that. Yes, you lose some of the nice benefits like being able to migrate the workloads around. The idea of cloud bursting really doesn't work, unfortunately, in that sort of environment, because you can't cloud burst a high security service onto Amazon servers where they could potentially leave data behind. But cloud and security and high security can go together. It is a bit more complex than I've painted, though. There are other aspects, like when people talk about impact levels, there's 3 aspects to impact levels: the confidentiality, the integrity, and the assurance of the data. You also have to consider the threat. Are you worried about some script kiddies hacking in and getting the Prime Minister's private medical data, or are you worried about a concerted attack from a foreign national power trying to actually inject data into your health records to cause some sort of pandemic? But fundamentally, these are all tractable problems. So I really don't think that security needs to be a blocker when you're talking about the government using cloud. Actually, the bigger problem that we're coming across is the commercial aspects, particularly EU procurement law, which I just won't bore you with, but unfortunately the Europeans do like their legislation. Anyway, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.